20th day of July 2022. Well, it's wonderful to have your company on this day. Well, Brisbane is still looking very good. It's 14 degrees, but it's not as bright today. It's a little bit of cloud hanging around there as well. But once again, it is beautiful. It is Brisbane. Well, right now, let's get back into the news segment. So we have the news and our daily India report in this segment. And 10 a.m. we will have Usha Chandra of GlobeNet Realty with the weekly real estate update, which is exclusive to Australian Indian Radio, with looking at what is happening in the market at this point in time when there is so much talk about uncertainty, rising inflation, rising interest rate, declining property values, and less number of people coming into the market. What is actually happening on the ground? We'll find out all that plus much, much more at 10 a.m. with Usha Chandra of GlobeNet Realty. Well, right now for the first news, let's go to ICT, where we're going to be opening pill and drug testing clinics.
Alex Ross King became the face of the push for pill testing in Australia when she died after taking ecstasy tablets at a festival in Sydney in 2019.
On her phone, there were screenshots of her trying to find out information about MDMA, but she didn't know where to go. She didn't know where to get it from, and she certainly couldn't have come to me because I couldn't have helped her either. Australia's
first foray into pill testing was at Canberra's Groove in the Moo Festival in 2018. But it was short-lived, with insurance issues scuttling plans for this year's festival. This new program is strategically placed near Canberra's main night spots, and organisers expect a brisk trade.
There is opportunistic drug purchasing, I guess, but for the most part people are pretty organised. They get their outfit ready and they get their pill ready that they might be wanting to take.
We'll do our best to make sure that people understand the interactions of the drugs that they're going to be taking and how they may build on each other and have unwanted effects.
The tests will include injectable drugs like heroin, and one of the main contaminants being tested will be fentanyl. Police are supporting the program for the moment, but not everyone's on board.
The reality is that the people that have been dying from MDMA, it's not because of the contaminant, it's because of the MDMAs.
Jen Ross King has one message for those who think pill testing encourages drug taking.
Previous New South Wales Premier would constantly say this is a green light, this is a green light. In my opinion, it's actually a red light because they're actually stopping for a moment.
And she's hoping Canberra's example will soon be followed across the country. Elizabeth Byrne, ABC News, Canberra.
Well, of course, yes, that's the two part of the equation. Number one, the testing is there for safeguarding, but, as the concern was that are we giving it the green light? So that is not a good sign there as well. Well, right now, Labor accuses government of obstructing Baralaro inquiry.
He usually provides legal counsel to the government, but today Chris Carr was called upon to give evidence about the controversy engulfing his employer.
I would categorise my involvement in this as quite limited.
The General Counsel for the Department of Enterprise, Investment and Trade contradicted what was said by former bureaucrat Jenny West. She was told she was a successful applicant for the trade role.
Ms West's evidence was that her contract terms were finalised on 13 August 2021. She also stated that she was fully offered the job, her words. That is not correct.
He told the inquiry there were issues that were never finalised. After Ms West learned she may not be going to New York because of a government change in the recruitment process, he spoke to her on the phone. She took notes at the time, saying her colleague was horrified to hear about the situation.
That was not a word that I would have used. I have difficulty with this note in the sense that I was speaking with a colleague who was quite plainly in a situation where I felt the need to console her.
A week before, Mr Carr had provided advice on whether the commissioner roles could become ministerial appointments. John Baralaro went to Cabinet to make the change.
There was no shocking evidence from today's hearing, but this parliamentary probe is a fact-finding mission to uncover what happened behind closed doors that led to John Baralaro eventually getting the New York job. The upper house has also called for the paperwork. But the opposition claims not all of it has been produced.
Providing these documents is about transparent government and about the upper house doing its job. At this point, the government is obstructing that work.
Mr Baralaro has withdrawn from accepting the position. Ashley Raper, ABC News, Sydney.
A job that he won, but a job that he could not keep. Well, that is such is politics, and of course when you look at the way the first she was offered that job and almost ready to take up the position when the changes in policy, and then the job was then allocated to Baralaro. Well, right now, under this investigation and everything, he has refused to take on that job. Interesting scenario all there. Well, right now, report from Wellington, where there is widespread fires. And of course, we know that all of Europe there is so much heat wave going across, and London, and we have seen many scenes coming out of England as well, where there have been lots of fires as well. So we are on the other end of the equation.
These days, just playing with her dog is enough to exhaust Jessica Mercer. The 36-year-old has long COVID. She suffers from symptoms like fatigue, breathlessness and heart palpitations.
It's flipped my life upside down. I feel like a bit of a shell of myself. My former self, it's changed my working habits, my social habits, my everyday life.
Ms Mercer can now only work part-time as a teacher and has used up most of her sick leave. She can't get workers' compensation because she didn't get COVID at work, and she doesn't have an income protection insurance policy.
I've had to reduce my income by about 40%. It's also meant that at times I've had to really prioritise medical appointments because they're obviously not cheap.
Australia doesn't collect data on long COVID. Actuaries like Jennifer Lang are professional statisticians who calculate risk, often for the insurance industry.
What we've effectively done is added another form of disability into the community, so we'd expect to have some more insurance claims from people who are disabled by long COVID.
100,000 Australians could be left with a serious disability as the result of long COVID within months. Another 300,000 could have some limitations on their daily life.
We need to make sure that income support is available to them. Ideally, they'll still be able to work, and so workplaces would be able to make adjustments to help people work.
It's a good time for people to check their insurance, to make sure they understand exactly what they've got. And it's a good idea to ask your superannuation fund about what you've got in super, or your life insurer about what you're covered for.
Unions say people who get long COVID will need government income support.
The reality is that people get allocated 10 days sick leave per year, and as we know with long COVID, we're talking people being ill for months, if not even longer.
With widespread community transmission, unions warn workers will fall through the cracks. It's getting harder to prove you got COVID at work, and they say workers' compensation claims are lower than expected. But according to lawyers, that doesn't mean bosses are off the hook.
As an employer, you could certainly open yourself up to a greater risk of liability if you are encouraging your staff to return to work.
Megan Fraser's life has also been severely affected by long COVID. She wasn't infected at work and is unsure if she's eligible for income protection.
I'm the sole income in my family, so if I don't work, we essentially have no income, so it's put a huge financial pressure on me.
She's cut back her hours, but the high school teacher is worried about what being reinfected might mean for her health.
I would say that I'm functioning at less than half of what I was able to do last year. And I have no answers as to whether that's going to improve or anytime soon.
Long COVID, casting a new health and economic shadow.
So the long-term effect as well, and of course the outreach is much further than what's on the surface. So, there are far more consequences relating to the long-term cause of that. Well, right now let's go to South Australia.
To the outside world, Charlie was a happy 6-year-old.
She was the most beautiful little girl I've ever seen in my life. So full of smiles.
But police believe she died of serious neglect.
But the death of a young child, a 6-year-old girl, obviously causes concern for everybody to want to know how this occurred and understand the circumstances. So I would say, we take this very seriously.
Charlie collapsed at her Manopara home on Friday and died soon after arriving at hospital. Her 5 siblings, aged between 7 and 16, have been removed.
So there were various stages of concern for the state of those children.
Police have set up a major crime task force and promised maximum resources. Charlie and her family have been known to authorities for several years. No fewer than 4 government agencies have had contact.
Human Services, which does the working with families, also child protection, also education and housing, because the family was living in a housing trust home.
The ABC also understands police have been involved with this family. The children's father, who is a significant drug user, has recently been jailed for a serious and horrifying act of domestic violence committed against the mother in front of the children.
At sentencing, the judge noted the children were at school and cared for, but authorities haven't said whether that is still the case.
What we need to do is go through the process to ask the questions: what interactions occurred, could they have been any different, and are there any lessons?
Those who knew the family say they notified child protection authorities 8 times.
I think Charlie did not deserve to die. She had her whole life ahead of her. She was a fighter. The system failed her, absolutely failed her, and I think it's disgusting.
I understand how heartbreaking it is for everybody who hears about this, and how frustrated people would also be.
Not for the first time, the public and the government left looking for answers. Claire Campbell, ABC News, Adelaide.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now we'll go to Sri Lanka before we go to the Daily India Report. And don't forget that at 10 a.m. we have the weekly real estate update with Ushi Chandra. A state of emergency has been declared in Sri Lanka.
In an alleyway outside her home, grandmother Aralapan Rani is cooking a fish curry for her family. Every meal is made out here these days with whatever she can find as fuel for the fire.
Over the past few months, we have been very sad. There's no gas, no kerosene oil to cook in a kerosene cooker, no firewood.
There are 3 generations under Rani's roof, and sometimes there's not enough food for all of them.
These are stressful times for us. We are day wage earners, always thinking of how to feed the kids and carry on with life.
Sri Lanka is going through an unprecedented economic crisis. Inflation exceeds 50%, and there are shortages of food, fuel and other essentials. Everyone in Rani's neighbourhood in the country's biggest city, Colombo, is feeling the pinch.
All things are very expensive. Cooking and buy rice, everything is very expensive.
There are daily power cuts for hours at a time, but even when there is electricity, it's costly to keep the lights on.
We don't know how the future will look. We don't know if prices will get higher or lower. We are hoping it will be lower, because if it's higher, we won't be able to live.
There are 22 million people on this tiny island nation, and they're all affected by the economic crisis in some way. Around the corner we find one of the many long lines of drivers queuing for petrol. Tuk-tuk driver Jude Fernando is almost at the front.
How long have you been in the queue?
About 5 days now.
5 days?
Yes.
And do you sleep here at night or do you go home?
Not sleeping very well.
Are you sleeping in your tuk-tuk?
Yes, tuk-tuk. Not good sleep. Many troubles.
The drivers have just found out the petrol's run out today, so they'll have to wait for more to be delivered.
When you get to the front of the queue here, how much petrol are you allowed to buy?
Only 5 litres.
Only 5 litres?
5 litres.
How long does that last?
Only 4 hours, 3 hours, we finish.
So you queue for 5 days to be able to work for 3 hours?
Yes.
Wow. How do you feel about that?
Getting angry. Not only me, everybody.
That anger is being felt right across the nation. People have been protesting for the past 3 months. It all came to a head just over a week ago when thousands stormed the luxury residence of their strongman president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa. They blame him and his government for the mess their country's in. Sri Lankans who'd been battling to make ends meet for months lapped up the palatial surroundings, then occupied the place for the next 5 days. Budi Praboda Karunaratne was one of the first people to break into the colonial-era building.
We were talking about for past 3 months, and when we actually did it, it was like hard to believe.
Since April, Budi has been living in this tent city next to the presidential precinct, which was set up by protesters demanding President Rajapaksa resign.
So we gather around in the evening and we discuss and we plan our strategies, what should we do, what shouldn't we do. And I think living here was it helped us to plan many things and fight against this government.
For Budi, it all started with one social media post saying he was going to start a protest against the ruling blokes who didn't understand how people were suffering.
I was just an individual who made a statement on social media and I wanted people to join as well.
Hundreds did the very next day. Then they joined up with other like-minded groups and a movement was born. Almost 100 days later, they achieved their goal. President Rajapaksa fled the country and resigned.
When you can go from sun-kissed to mountain mist, that's so Sri Lanka.
Just a few years ago, Sri Lanka was a nation with so much promise. Tourism was booming and the government borrowed heavily from overseas banks and countries, including China, to build infrastructure. Then in 2019, there were deadly terror attacks in Colombo. And after that, along came COVID and the tourists stopped coming. Rajapaksa dipped into foreign exchange reserves and cut taxes to try to keep the country afloat, but his policies failed.
In amongst all this, the Rajapaksa government decided Sri Lanka would go organic, and it banned the use of all chemical fertilisers and pesticides. The result for farmers was catastrophic, and soon the effects would be felt at markets like this, where the price of staples like rice and fresh fruit and vegetables went through the roof.
There is light at the end of the tunnel. We hope to engineer and garner and mobilize all resources available to make sure that Sri Lanka is once again prosperous.
Sri Lankans, though, have become very sceptical of politicians and their promises. Instead, they're relying on each other.
I'm very happy that the community and neighbours are united and we are managing these difficult times. At the moment, we don't know what our future will be, but we are united.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll leave that report there. Right now, time to go to our daily India report.
Welcome to the Daily India Report that brings you reports, interviews, features and much more on India and the Indian diaspora. In the latest round of military talks, India and China have agreed to work out mutually acceptable resolution. The Indian and Chinese armies agreed to work out a mutually acceptable resolution of the remaining issues in eastern Ladakh at the earliest during the 16th round of high-level talks on 17 July. A joint statement issued by the two sides said it was reaffirmed that the resolution of the pending issues would help in the restoration of peace and tranquility along the line of actual control in the region and enable progress in bilateral relations. The statement was issued on Monday night, a day after the two sides held talks that lasted for around 12.5 hours. Building on progress made at the last meeting on 11th March 2022, the two sides continued discussions for the resolution of the relevant issues along the LAC in the western sector in constructive and forward-looking manner, the statement said. The government refers to the eastern Ladakh region as the western sector. The Indian delegation at the talks was led by Lieutenant General Anindya Singh Gupta, the commander of the Leh-based 14 Corps, while the Chinese team was headed by South Xinjiang Military District Chief Major General Yang Lin. The 15th round of military dialogue, which took place on March 11, failed to yield any significant outcome. In the discussions on 17 July, the Indian delegation insisted on the restoration of the status quo ante as of April 2020 before the start of the military standoff. India has emerged as the top lender to Sri Lanka in the first 4 months of 2022. India emerged as a top lender to Sri Lanka during the first 4 months of this year, extending credit worth $376.9 million compared to $67.9 million from China as the island nation grapples with its worst economic crisis. A shortage of foreign exchange has left Sri Lanka struggling to pay for imports of food, medicine and energy for its 22 million people. Last month, the country defaulted on foreign debt and inflation increased by around 50%. The situation triggered massive protests that led to the resignation of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. India topped the list of lenders according to data on disbursement of funds in the 4 months through April 30th. The Asian Development Bank was the second largest lender in this period, with $359.6 million, followed by the World Bank with $67.3 million. The newspaper described the amount loaned by China as paltry. The report also said that India came to the rescue when Sri Lanka started experiencing an acute shortage of foreign currency at the beginning of this year. Indian origin UK MP Rishi Sunak has widened the lead in UK Prime Minister race. 115 Tory lawmakers back him. Former UK Finance Minister Rishi Sunak widened his lead in the latest round of voting on 18 July by the Conservative MPs to decide Britain's next Prime Minister, but the race to get in the final two tightened. Sunak won the support of 115 Tory lawmakers, followed by Penny Mordaunt on 82 votes, Liz Truss on 71, Kemi Badenoch on 58 and Tom Tugendhat on 31, who dropped out as the last place candidate the party announced. The MPs will keep voting until only 2 candidates remain and the party members decide the winner. Mordaunt has been bookmakers' favourite before the weekend but lost votes in the previous round. Foreign Secretary Truss closed the gap to 11 and can probably expect more support switching to her from Badenoch's backers should the insurgent candidate be eliminated in the next round, promising a tense race to make the final cut on 20th July. Former Maharashtra Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray has sacked several leaders from Shiv Sena amid tussle over party. Shiv Sena's Uddhav Thackeray, who is battling Eknath Shinde for the control of the party formed by his father, has sacked several key leaders for anti-party activities. Shinde, who succeeded Thackeray to the post of Chief Minister after bringing down his government, has been quick to react, picking up the leaders discarded by Thackeray camp. The rebel camp claims to be the real Shiv Sena, while the Uddhav Thackeray-led group claims the rebels are a breakaway faction of the party. The pruning comes ahead of the crucial Supreme Court hearing on the huge political storm in Maharashtra following the rebellion by Shinde, which led to the installation of the Shinde BJP government. On 28 July, the top court will hear a bunch of petitions from both sides regarding disqualification of MLAs and the legality of whips and appointments within the party. As the tussle between Shiv Sena factions intensified ahead of the hearing, Team Thackeray sacked former Minister Vijay Shivtare, MLA Santosh Bangar, who was sacked as District Chief of Hingoli, Naresh Mahaske as Zila Pramukh for Thane. Barring the first, both the leaders have been reinstated by the Shinde camp, which claims to be the real Shiv Sena. After 2 monkeypox cases, Indian government asked for strict screening of passengers. The Union government on 18 July asked ports and airports to ensure strict health screening of all international travellers to contain the spread of monkeypox on the day India reported its second case from Kerala. The meeting was attended by airport and the port health officers and the regional directors from regional offices of health and family welfare, the government said. They were advised to ensure strict health screening of all arriving international travellers, which can minimize the risk of importation of monkeypox cases into the country. They were advised and reoriented in the clinical presentation of monkeypox disease as per MOHFW's guidelines for management of monkeypox disease, it said. They were also advised to coordinate with other stakeholder agencies like immigration at international ports and airports to streamline health screening process. On 18 July, a 31-year-old man from Kerala tested positive for monkeypox. He is being treated at Pariyaram Medical College in Kannur and is stable, the State Health Department has confirmed. Last week, a man who had returned to Kerala from UAE had tested positive for monkeypox. The World Health Organization has said that it would reconvene its expert monkeypox committee on July 21st to decide whether the outbreak constitutes a global health emergency. For the first time ever, Indian rupee has hit 80 per dollar. The rupee hit $80 for the first time ever on 19 July as the traders focus on central bank meetings this week, especially the US Federal Reserve. The real fear now is that after rupee breached the 80 to a dollar level, the fall could be even steeper as a break of key psychological rate increases bets in favor of a free fall after, as we have witnessed since the rupee weakened beyond 77 a dollar rate. The rupee was last at 80.0163 against greenback after opening at 79.9863, hitting an intraday record low of 80.0175. The rupee at an all-time low of 80.05 against the US dollar in early trade, a gain of 7 paise from the previous close. The Indian rupee hit a 7th straight session of record lows on 19 July as the weakness in domestic shares weighed, but dollar selling intervention by the central bank helped limit further losses. The Indian currency has plunged over 7% this year, with it closing at a record low in 6 of the last 7 sessions. The rupee has been battered by an exodus of foreign investors, widening trade and current account deficits, and driven by a global stampede into safe haven US dollars on rising global recession risks. After 70 days, passenger train services will resume in parts of northeast India. After nearly 70 days, the Northeast Frontier Railway will resume passenger train services in Lumting, Badarpur section in Assam state on July 22nd. Both passenger and the freight train services were cancelled due to heavy rain and unprecedented landslides on May 14th. This section will connect Tripura, Mizoram, Manipur and southern parts of Assam with the rest of the country. NFR spokesperson Sabyasachi Day said freight train services started on July 12th in the Lumting Badarpur section via Dima Hasao Mountainous District, which is only rail route to connect Tripura, Mizoram, Manipur and southern Assam with the other parts of the country. Railway officials, engineers and workers worked day and night to bring back the national transport on track in these affected areas so that scarcity of essential items in states like Manipur, Tripura, Mizoram and Barak Valley, southern Assam areas could be avoided, the spokesperson said. Dun Kar Do is the new song released from the upcoming Akshay Kumar film Raksha Bandhan.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have time for you in this segment. Don't forget that at 10 a.m. We will be joined by Usha Chandra of GlobeNet Reality with the weekly real estate update. Until then, it's goodbye from us.